Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM, where I'm joined by Sister Nusrat, Hannah and Halima to continue our discussion on establishing a productive relationship with the Quran. Please do call into the studio if you've got any tips that you think can help us, or you can tweet us at Islam Channel #WAM15. So alhamdulillah, it's been a really good discussion so far. We've talked about what hinders people, why we have a certain outlook on the Quran, but how does having a relationship with the Quran change a person? Because we talk about the Quran being like the book, it's the miracle that Allah sent down, the very last miracle. So how does this relationship with it change us, Nusrat?
Well, we should look at it that it changes you both inwardly and outwardly, because the two aren't divorced. When you read the Quran, you feel like you realize the inward change. So one of them would be conviction. If belief starts to become firmer. So for example, some people who may waver or not have a firm belief, whether in an aspect of Islam or Islam in its totality, you'll find that the more you read the Quran, you derive strength from these stories. So for me, when I read the Quran, it actually emboldened me and empowered me to be like very firm in the truth, and it gave me confidence. Islam is the deen that actually gives people confidence as well as the intellectual foundations. I found that as well, you have a sound heart, because it's related also in Surah Ar-Ra'd, verse 28. Verily in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. And it's true, when you have anxiety, you find rest, and you're able to not only find rest and ease, but you're also able to use your approaching self as a form of discerning which is good for you and which is bad for you. So you become al-Furqan in that sense. You have an awareness of your purpose of life as well, so you know why you're here, why you're doing the stuff that you're doing, and where you're going. And even outwardly, you begin to start implementing the teachings of Islam, obviously based on context as well, and emulating the characteristics mentioned in the Quran. So you start trying to foster an Islamic environment where wherever you are. So you actually start putting theory into practice, and that's what I found helped me.
And what kind of things have you put into practice? So what are sort of the theoretical things that you found that you've put into practice?
In terms of putting into practice, I found dawah to be incumbent upon me. So whenever I find something wrong, I try and do something about it. If not, I say it, and if not, I hate it in my heart. So you learn to actually establish truth and be on that path of truth, regardless of what anyone says. And seeing the prophets and what the Prophet ﷺ went through this Quran has emboldened me, and it should embolden other Muslims to continue on that path.
Alhamdulillah. Sister Hannah, I think you were going to say something before I asked her.
No, mashallah, I think Sister Nusrat summed it up brilliantly. I'm not going to do it any better than that. But I think even something that she mentioned earlier in terms of pondering and contemplation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically says in Surah Sa'ad, verse 29, this is a book which we have sent down to you full of blessings, so that they may ponder over its verses and men of understanding may remember. And I think that, we were saying earlier about how, physically in terms of productivity, when you're so busy and you just don't have time to rest, you often don't necessarily, allocate that time for contemplating over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. That's something that I think, especially in Ramadan, really brings that back to us, and taking out that time to just think about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying.
It's a really good point, because a lot of people talk about how meditation is just so amazing, which it is, but I think you can use that time, as using that time to use it for contemplation. Absolutely. So that will be your time to meditate. Everything's 100%. Going crazy. You're on the bus, you're in the tube, wherever you are, you're sitting down for a quick cup of coffee. Obviously, not during Ramadan. You're sitting for a quick cup of coffee somewhere just to kind of get yourself going. You take that moment to contemplate on what it is that you're doing. I mean, Sister Halima, what sort of things do you find, having a relationship with the Quran does to a person, or for you personally?
For me personally, I think having a relationship with the Quran, fundamentally, we know our purpose is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's to have a relationship with Him. And at the end of the day, it's really beautifully summed up, I think, for me, in a saying by Khabbab ibn al-Art. And he said that, do anything that you wish to get close to Allah, but you will never get close to Him through anything more beloved than the Quran. So if this is our purpose, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this is the means to self-fulfillment, this is the means to true happiness and success, this is why it's so important to have a relationship with the Quran.
SubhanAllah. I mean, what can we do to increase our want or a need to having a productive relationship with the Quran? Because sometimes we kind of lack that feeling, we kind of lack that urgency to want to have that connection. So what is it that we can do, Sister Hannah?
I think it's a really good question. I think the first thing to do when approaching it is not to underestimate it. Truly believe that the Quran can change your life, and then absolutely, inshallah, it will. And I think another than the secondary thing I would say is putting yourself in a good atmosphere. you know, even just playing the Quran in your house, in your car, you know, when you're going to sleep. One thing that my mum always did when me and my brothers and sisters were growing up is she used to put on Sheikh Abu Bakr Shatri, the last Juz Amma, the 30th Juz. And subhanAllah, even when we were doing hifz at that age, it would just help us in our memorizing like that. We'd just be reciting to our hifz teacher and we'd just carry on, because as we were going to sleep, that was always the thing that we would be hearing. And I think that just that environment, you know, it encourages you to go and to read into the Quran more. But I think one thing that I would say, you know, without taking away from all of that, is that most definitely do not look at the Quran without the Sunnah, the Seerah and the Hadith as well. You know, they're totally inextricable. A lot of when you're looking as well at the tafsir of the Quran, it won't be holistic, it won't be complete without looking at sort of, you know, the other evidences that come with it.
It's knowing everything in context.
Absolutely.
Because every ayah came down at a certain time for a certain reason.
Yeah.
I mean, Sister Halimah, mashallah, you have this extraordinary organization now set up to help people reconnect with the Quran. But have you found that people maybe lack that want and need in having that relationship with the Quran? What would you say in terms of trying to re-establish that want and need?
I mean, I think that's true. That's very true. And a lot of people, they want to have a relationship with the Quran, but there's no drive there. There's no motivation. They don't know how to fall in love with the Quran. Because, you know, we read so many stories from the Seerah where, you know, people have arrows in them and they're still continuing to recite because of the beauty of the Quran. It overtakes them physically, emotionally, and people want that, but they just don't know how to encourage that. So that's what we do in terms of personal development, in terms of trying to encourage people. So, for example, even really simple tips in terms of, like, I would suggest people to be in the company of people who love the Quran. Because subhanAllah, something that simple, for example, let's say we were, you know, very close friends, and when we were together, you would tell me about such and such a sister who I don't know, but you spoke very highly of her with a lot of love and admiration. Automatically, my heart would soften towards this person. I would want to build a relationship with this. So I think that being around people who admire the Quran, who are in awe of it, I think something as simple as that can really help us, you know, towards wanting to build a relationship and fall in love with the Quran. And like the sister said, you know, listening to the Quran is very, very powerful, because when the Quran came, it didn't come in the form of it didn't come in a written form. It came in the form of recital, and that's because there is a power to speech. And I think that nowadays we're very lucky. We have a lot of resources to hundreds of different reciters. So I think to really look at certain websites and find a reciter whose recitation really touches your heart is something that can help as well, inshallah.
Yeah, I mean, subhanAllah, you know, environment is a big thing. We're always told, you know, growing up, that we should be careful about the people that we befriend and the types of people that we have around us, because obviously they're going to lead us in a certain direction. So obviously environment is a big, big thing. But what happens, so for example, for some people, subhanAllah, you know, Arabic is not their first language, or they might be reverts. They have this barrier in having this love for the Quran. So for them, it's that kind of love, or that kind of need, that kind of tug that some of us might feel towards the Quran doesn't exist. So, you know, what can we do to help them? I mean, has it happened to any of you? I know Sister Nusrat, mashallah, you're a revert. Have you found that difficult in terms of having that connection?
For me, initially it was difficult because Arabic wasn't my first language. And initially, obviously, I converted when I was really young. You're kind of looking at all these symbols like, what does that even mean? So I had to recite some of my surahs like Al-Fatiha in English, which even then seemed quite strange because I'm not used to using words like lo and I believe not. I wasn't used to that. So I think for me, how to build it was through like using interactive things, interactive books that actually helped me understand the Arabic language in a fun way. I received encouragement, alhamdulillah. So your environment definitely plays a big role. And now that I can actually recite some of the surahs in Arabic, I also learned how to recite privately to myself. And even though I'm not, you know, by no means I'm not a mashari, even if I'm bad at it, I will recite it privately. And I even got sometimes, even with my dad, actually, he asked me to recite Surah Ashar to him, and he liked it, and I found that as a form of encouragement. So even committing yourself to reading the Quran, whether it's in English or whether it's in Arabic, a little bit each day actually does help, and ponder it, because you're looking for quality, essentially, not quantity. Yeah. So that's important.
SubhanAllah.
I think with regards to this question, you know, a lot of reverts or people who are just coming to the deen, or maybe people whose, you know, Arabic's not their first language, I think they become discouraged. You know, they might find difficulty with it and stuff and things like that. But I think that essentially to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you, is motivating enough, because subhanAllah, if you know, with people he gave the language, yes, they get rewarded for, you know, reciting, but with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So he rewards us based on our effort. So people who do struggle, to remember the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put you in that position so you could get extra reward, more so than people who can recite it with ease, is something that can inshallah keep them going.
Yeah, subhanAllah, I think that's a really beautiful point. And Hannah, what have your experiences been?
I think, well, I haven't really got much to add after that, mashallah. Both of them like really, really good advice. I think as well, something that I was always encouraged to do, and many other sisters around me always do, is reading the Quran with the translation. Because when you really put yourself in the position of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to me, that is when you really feel the power of those words. But at the same time, you know, without taking away from any of the importance of that, listening to it is just, you know, absolutely beautiful. You know, the language of the Quran itself is that it's miracle. You know, that's the everlasting miracle. And I've seen, especially this Ramadan, so many stories of people who, subhanAllah, you know, they've heard the tilawah during Taraweeh prayers, and, you know, they've become interested in Islam, and some people have even converted, non-Muslims. Alhamdulillah. And, you know, so it is beautiful, and it's designed to inspire and touch our hearts, and I think that, you know, keeping that up is definitely something to break those barriers.
I actually heard some of these stories as well,
Yeah.
mashallah. I think one thing that I would say to sisters, because Arabic is not my first language, is try to learn Arabic, because when I first started to learn Arabic, I can tell you it made a world of a difference. I got so emotional listening to khutbahs, not because necessarily of what the Imam was saying, but because of the fact that I could understand most of what the Imam was saying. So I think learn some Arabic as well, and that will help you have that connection with the Quran and the word of Allah as well, because the more you learn, the more you want to recite, and the more you understand it, and the more you understand, the more it enters your heart. So I think that's one thing I would say to the
Implementation
sisters.
as well. Implement the Quran in your daily life, obviously within context, do so, because it will actually impact and reaffirm your conviction as well.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair for such a wonderful discussion, sisters. It is easy to feel like you're lost at sea with no hope of being rescued, and everything can feel like it's just too much, but we are redeemable and able to change these thoughts and feelings if we truly put in the effort to remember Allah and to read His words. In chapter 13, verse 28, we are told, "Verily, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest." Our solace and peace lies with Allah, so let's turn back to Him in hope and gratitude. We've had some really great reminders and advice, but if you've missed any of today's show, all is not lost, as you can catch the highlights from this week on Sunday at 3 p.m. We're off to another break now, but just before we go, here is the WAM Ramadan Challenge and today's ayah from Surah Al-Mulk.